we are live, everybody. Welcome to this week's Café Hangout.
Hello, everybody. It's John Pollock and Wai Ting here with you for the next 90 minutes as we are going to be chatting with several guests on the show. We're going to be opening up the phone lines and tackling what is the biggest news story in the world. And, of course, no industry is spared from its effects as well, discussing the coronavirus and news breaking at a fever pitch as well. There is just so much coming down by the hour. So we're going to try our best to keep up with all of it. And joining us on the show today, specific to that issue, is one of our listeners, Alex Patel, who's a critical care physician here in Toronto at a local hospital. He's going to be joining us to kind of share his perspective on this, what he is dealing with day to day, and hopefully impart some valuable information to a lot of people that listen. Whenever something like this occurs, there's always a lot of questions, and unfortunately, sometimes a lot of misinformation gets spread out there, and that's a very critical part of this whole thing, is to be realizing where you are getting your information from, looking at places like the Center for Disease Control, the World Health Organization, and relying on credible outlets out there, because it's very easy to get caught up in stuff that is either inaccurate or just misleading. So I look forward to speaking with Alex as well. We had already scheduled for Benno to be joining us, and he was at WXW's 16 Carat Gold weekend this past week, and we'll discuss with him kind of what the environment was like there, as the coronavirus was certainly on a lot of people's minds, and several, Jamesy included, ended up not going last weekend to attend that because of those concerns. We'll talk with him about kind of how it has ramped up over the past couple of days over in Europe, and going into this weekend, where this morning OTT made the call. They are scrapping their events of Scrappermania. Yeah. So that eliminates, their show on Saturday. They had sold over 2,000 tickets to that show. This is going to have a debilitating effect on a lot of smaller companies, on talent. It's like, that's the thing. It's just everyone, feels this in different ways. So we're going to tackle this as best we can.
What is the latest thus far concerning WrestleMania? So as of today, there was a meeting in the city, and this comes courtesy of Chris Welch, who's an editor at The Verge, and he wrote that the city of Tampa is putting the decision to postpone WrestleMania firmly in the court of WWE. No order to cancel it yet, but officials are highlighting the governor urging cities and companies to cancel large gatherings. The message is clear. He goes on to say local officials emphasizing that the situation is fluid and they want to give it a week. WrestleMania is a little over 3 weeks away. Hillsborough County Sheriff Chad Chronister said WWE is taking all of this under advisement and consideration, and that's what he states. So Jane Castor, who is the mayor of Tampa, was quoted as stating that they don't have to make immediate decisions about events that are several weeks away, and that would include WrestleMania. The governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, has stated that they are very much persuading people not to hold large gatherings, which WrestleMania would fall under. So it seems that it is a bit of a disconnect from the various levels of government in Florida. And I think you just have to look at the action that other large-scale events are taking, ones that are happening way beyond 3 weeks from now. When we look at various concerts, conventions, what the NBA did on Wednesday night, suspending its season. The NHL has now followed suit. Major League Soccer has followed in the same. They are putting their games on pause. Numerous college basketball conferences are putting their games on hold. It seems that everyone is kind of following in this order. And when you look at just different examples across the world, it seems that the New York Times was talking about this morning, that the World Health Organization, they were praising the actions taken by China and South Korea, that were some extreme measures taken to try and contain this as best as possible, and that Italy, they feel, were very late to respond to this and saw them grow to become number 2 among deaths due to the virus. And now Italy is going to these extreme measures, like essentially the country is on lockdown. And I think that you have to look at those kinds of actions and inaction. And I don't know at this moment how you kind of push through this other than, and I completely understand, like, these are major decisions that a company is going to face from a revenue perspective, and that's part of the equation for these companies. Like, that's just exactly, that is how they are going to be balancing all of this, because if it was strictly just from a preventable measure, this event's off.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel, though, at this point in time, when the world has already been through this for, I would say, more than a month now, we've seen the lessons that we should have learned by now. And I would say it's definitely inexcusable, in my opinion, that Tampa has, not just stepped in and said, hey, this isn't happening. Because we know that the WWE, if it's up to them, they will just go on.
It's kind of just a game of, putting the decision onto the other. And no side wants to be the one that tells the audience that this show is not happening.
And are we not past that point where, we have to place such a priority over business and revenue over the health of potentially thousands of people that might turn into tens of thousands of people and more than that?
It certainly is. I think you can look at WWE, and it's one thing that this weekend not happening, it's a hit, but it's not as though, like, I can understand a lot of the smaller companies when Sami Callihan put up a video this morning that they are trying their best to keep this weekend, their independent show, going this weekend, stating that if we don't do this, like, we could go bankrupt. I mean, that is the reality for a lot of independent companies, is that their livelihood is show to show. Like, they live very much hand to mouth based on how the latest show, the money that they put into the next show, it's recouped on the back end by producing such a show. So you can understand when you see a lot of independent promoters and independent wrestlers pushing for the idea that let's hope that these shows happen, because this is such a huge week for them that determines for some of them, their entire year is based upon a couple of days over WrestleMania weekend. So you have to understand the perspective that people are coming from. Others are able to look at this kind of more clear of what the bigger priority is, which is people's health.
Yeah. Ultimately, I just think about what the worst case scenario is. And you're very much, I think, playing with fire when you're, at this point, deciding to hold events, especially a month out from where we even are right now, when this thing is expected to get much worse. And I feel for anybody who has travel plans that, has booked time off from work, has booked plane tickets, has booked airfare, and not knowing really whether or not they should be going, because the companies themselves haven't really made a firm decision about that.
So we are going to be updating as much as possible throughout this. I'm always very cautious to just like relay stuff here, because you want to make sure
things change by the minute.
Things are changing quickly. Apparently, Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York, has just banned gatherings of 500 or more people effective this Friday. So that would certainly affect next week's AEW card in Rochester. I did call the arena this morning and spoke with a representative who technically works with the minor hockey team there, who just stated that an announcement would be forthcoming from the arena regarding next week's AEW show. AEW, at last check, they have not stated anything publicly. Combate out of Brazil has reported that this Saturday's UFC card in Brasilia would be in front of an empty arena. The UFC has not yet commented on that. Bellator currently has a show scheduled for Friday night in Uncasville, Connecticut. One Championship in Asia, they're doing empty arena shows through the middle of May. So those are just some of the measures being taken, and there's so many. This affects everyone. We are still waiting for an official announcement from WWE about the status of SmackDown on Friday night, and it was scheduled for Little Caesars Arena in Detroit. Then we saw the report on Wednesday night that it may be moving to the PC. It would seem very difficult to imagine it taking place at Little Caesars Arena, which is where the Utah Jazz played this past weekend.
Saturday. Yeah.
This past Saturday. Mm-hmm. Like, that alone would, to me, be disqualifying to hold an event there. But that has not been made official yet by WWE, so we are still waiting for them to make that announcement.
Do you want to open up the phone lines a little bit?
Yeah, we are happy to talk with anyone and discuss whatever subjects you would like. I think this is certainly the predominant one, though.
1-732-800-4423 or Skype us post wrestling. Phone lines are open, talking obviously about this issue, and later on in the show, of course, we have a couple guests as well. But get your phone calls in right now. What do you guys think about this? Do you have plans to go to WrestleMania? Are you comfortable if you do have those plans? And all in all, how is this affecting perhaps your day to day? We're very curious. So maybe we start off here with our man, Neil, in Ireland. How you doing, Neil? Oh, can you?
Guys, hello.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm sorry, I was just on the lag there with the video.
Not a problem.
Okay, what's on your mind, Neil?
Getting that done. Yeah, well, there's so many aspects to this story. First of all, very, very quickly, Wai, happy birthday for later on this week. On a happier note.
Thank you.
And I hope you enjoy your weekend. One thing, and it's not really obviously there are, as you mentioned, people with travel plans and so on. I'm one of those, but I'm really quite relaxed about all of that at the moment because, hey, whatever will be, and if WrestleMania is cancelled as looks likely, there'll be refunds and there'll be other times. My main gripe about this isn't absolutely laser focused on wrestling. I've been watching a bit of you can't miss it, the coverage from across the Atlantic and from the Trump administration, and this notion that he's calling it a foreign virus. His Secretary of State Mike Pompeo calls it the Wuhan virus, and Kevin McCarthy, the minority leader in the House, has been calling it the Chinese coronavirus. Mm-hmm. And I don't hear terminology like that from anywhere else. I don't want to get too political, but it does seem to be, let's other this thing, and Wai, I really don't want to put you on the spot as the kind of Canadian Asian correspondent on any of this sort of thing, but it makes me feel angry, hearing that sort of thing and the possible consequences of it. And I wonder what you guys thought. And that's all I have this week. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you, Neil.
Yeah. To be quite honest, I feel like I haven't necessarily felt that level of faith in, I think, that administration, to be culturally sensitive for a long time. So it's not something that really surprises me. Certainly it might be something that would bother me if I think I had higher expectations of, these political leaders, but it's not something that really is that surprising. It just seems it's disappointing, certainly, when you have, I think, supposed leaders of like a whole country, the most powerful country in the world, speaking, I think, a lot more ignorantly than, a lot of my friends that are just simply people that take the news in normally. But, I choose to associate with people in my life that I think are a lot more educated about these types of issues and are a lot more sensitive about the reality of what's going on.
And it's a larger discussion, but I don't think people are, I mean, just from his address on Wednesday night and, different aspects of that, travel restriction that had to be clarified the next day. It's just, anyway, it's not the first person you're looking for as an authority on this global crisis.
Back to the phone lines. Caller, what's going on?
Hello, post office. This is MJ from live in New York.
Hey, MJ, how you doing, man?
Had better days. Pretty down today, mostly in response to kind of how my company's handling the situation. And
how is your company handling this situation?
So for context, I work in a midtown office building, probably 35 floors. Basically just business as usual. They have been very reluctant to even suggest to people if they want to work from home, they can. And, I'm in a position where if I wanted to, I could. My boss would not have a problem with that. But it's just discouraging to see them handle it in such a corporate and cold fashion when the reality is like, we're at a point now where, and this is what I wanted to talk to you guys about. You can either be part of a solution, a community solution, a society solution, where whether you feel this is a dangerous disease, not a dangerous disease, no worse than the common flu, whatever you want it to be, we need to stop the spread of it, because the more it spreads, the more panic is created, and the more it's going to disrupt normal life, and it's going to take longer and longer and longer to get back to a place of normalcy. And to see institutions and corporations and in some cases now governments finally starting to act, but to see them drag their feet on being part of a global solution is a bit discouraging for me. And that's why I want to talk about Mania with you guys.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, you know, you guys know I was supposed to come down to Tampa, and I regrettably am going to say I'm out. Can't do it. And there's a bunch of reasons why. And one of them is I just don't know if I'd have as good a time as I would like, being concerned or having it in the back of my head whether or not it's safe to be in certain places. And the other is, I think, as a wrestling community and a wrestling, a group of fans, a community of fans and promoters and companies, we can all go down to Tampa and have an awesome weekend, and then we can leave Tampa. And who knows what we leave Tampa looking like? Bringing disease from other countries, bringing, things that I just don't think are necessary. And when I think about the WWE's social responsibility, which this is a pretty morally bankrupt company, we know that, but to have any social decency and to just basically stand up and say, look, we can put everybody's concerns ahead of our own and do what's right for the community, for the local communities. I just think that's important. And it's, I'm rambling because I'm a little all over the place with my thoughts.
No, it's understandable, MJ. I think a lot of people are in the same boat. I think a lot of people have the same concerns that you do several weeks out. And I think that it's still, I think people with a direct interest in traveling to Tampa for WrestleMania are slowly coming to the realization that you're at, that it just does not make a whole lot of sense to be moving forward with this. And the hope would be that WWE and the city of Tampa are kind of in lockstep with that as well. And I think that is, I think for most are kind of hopeful that is the outcome that occurs here. Although with the sympathy that it is going to negatively affect a lot of people financially. Like that's an unfortunate part of this.
Yeah,
but it's a reality.
And it sucks. Like,
yeah,
it is a reality, and it sucks. I guess part of the reason I'm sad today is because I made the decision I'm not going to do it, and I'm bummed I won't get to see you guys, and I won't get to hang out in the Air BDE that we were going to have, and see a bunch of people that, like Neil, who just called, who I couldn't wait to meet in person, and a bunch of other guys, and it sucks. I don't want refunds from any of the companies. You know what? I support you guys. I don't want my money back. I feel bad for you guys as much as I feel bad for myself, and I'm in a position where, for GCW where I bought tickets, and for Wally Mania and all these companies, like, keep the money. It's not about that to me. It's about doing what I think is morally and socially right at this point in time. Mm-hmm. And that includes you guys too. Keep the money. I don't care.
Well, we're not really going to get into addressing like our plans yet for Tampa and such. But
understandable, it's different.
But listen, for the people out there that may feel bad, do not feel bad for the two of us. Okay, there's we are absolutely not in any position that
we are so insignificant in this grand story that it is not even it's not of any concern for the two of us. Absolutely. So appreciate it, MJ. We're gonna have to let you go right now because we do have a guest coming on. But please feel better, man.
Thanks for booking Alex, by the way. Thank you for booking Alex.
Thank you for the suggestion.
He has been so good in the forums.
Yes,
so thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks a lot, MJ. Take care. Before we get to that, I do just want to read this. This was from the Washington Post yesterday when Dr. Anthony Fauci spoke. This was on Tuesday. And in regards, because I know that the comparison to the flu is one that has been repeated by a lot of people. And this was his quote about the flu has a mortality of 0.1%. This has a mortality rate of 10 times that. That's the reason I want to emphasize that we have to stay ahead of the game in preventing this. So, I mean, take it from the authorities here. I'm not saying for people to just be outraged and overwhelmed by panic, but at the same time, you cannot dismiss this, especially at this stage, and it's just irresponsible to do that.
I feel like last week that was certainly part of the discussion, but I mean, I feel like over the past 48 hours, I feel like people are coming to the realization that, yeah, this is worse than the flu. This is what's going on, and I hope so. I hope people are taking this a lot more seriously than maybe we have in the past week. Let's go to our first guest.
Benno is here with us from the British Wrestling Experience. We were bringing him on to chat about all of what went down in Germany last weekend for 16 Carat Gold weekend. But certainly there are major stories since then. Benno, first of all, welcome to the program.
Hey guys, what a day. Yeah, all that WXW stuff seems to pale in significance now to everything that's happened these last few days.
It's just been such a whirlwind, Benno, over the last couple of days.
Mm.
What is the sense of the mood over in England right now, just in your day-to-day over the past 24, 48 hours? I mean, over here, I mean, it is just, it's the only thing that's going on.
Mm. Yeah, it's pretty much all anybody is talking about, and that goes for not just England, but I think the entirety of Europe and the entirety of the world. It's just a conversation on everybody's lips, and yeah, it's interesting. Like 2 weeks ago, I traveled to Slovakia for a weekend trip. Back when the news was just breaking, and it didn't seem, it wasn't as heavy as it's been this week. Today, the borders are closed to that country. Far less cases there than there are at home in England, but yeah, they've taken that step. Obviously, I was in Germany last week, and they were a lot quicker than England in announcing closure of big events with more than 1,000 people. Other countries, Ireland have closed now. They're closing schools, and they're talking about, as we know, OTT's cancelled this weekend, so sporting events are getting cancelled. Whereas in the UK, yeah, a couple of hours ago, our Prime Minister took to the news and essentially said all schools are staying open, and all hospitals are staying open, and there won't be any cancelling of any live sports. So we're all a little bit perplexed in England, kind of watching the rest of the world maybe have a slightly quicker response than we are.
How about your workplace environment, Benno? Like, you don't have to go into any specifics that you don't want to, but is it just what's kind of the mood maybe among colleagues and such coming out of all of this?
Yeah, again, it's a big conversation piece. I work in what we call in the UK the civil service, so I am paid by the government, and we should probably know first before anybody else. But we're still waiting for information. I think everyone's a bit paranoid. I was obviously like I said, I was in Germany last weekend. Came home. Last couple of days, I started to notice I had a bit of a sore throat, and you start panicking, don't you? You start thinking, oh
Yeah.
God, what's what is the actual right thing to do? Our prime minister came out today and did say, if anybody has a cold or they experience flu symptoms, then people should self isolate. But it does sound like a common theme throughout the world is just there's information out there, but it's what to believe in and how to take it and how literally to take some of the advice as well.
How much of this was part of the conversation of attendees that you visited when you were out there in Germany?
Yeah, it was a big conversation. Obviously, you guys mentioned earlier, Jamesy, my co-host on BWE, couldn't make it out. Obviously, with his job, he couldn't come home, and I think would have had to self-isolate for 2 weeks, so he couldn't justify that and couldn't come. There are other reasons people couldn't make it out. Flybe going out of business, as people will have heard on BWE, that affected Will Cooling. But the coronavirus was a big talking point. To the point where the promoters and the wrestling company put out that there'll be no shaking of hands at the show. I was there as media, and there'd be no shaking hands between the media. I believe the wrestlers were hitting feet against each other, kind of kicking each other's feet as a greeting instead. There were a lot of fist bumps exchanged and a lot of back pats, but everybody did do their best to avoid handshakes. But yeah, even me, I'm looking back at it now thinking, I made the decision to go. There wasn't really any government advice not to go at the point of going, but are these big wrestling events really worth it when the health of the world is at stake? And yeah, as I said, while we were there, we were all thinking, will this weekend even take place? And WXW just about got the weekend to take place, but while we were there, the local government announced they weren't going to allow gatherings of more than 1,000 people, which would have included WXW. So if that was a week later, it wouldn't have happened. Which does ask the question a little bit. Should it have happened in the first place? So far I've not heard any stories of anybody coming home sick, but it's a big event with lots of people coming from all around the world. So yeah, that was definitely on everybody's mind there, and I think everybody's mind still now that we're all back at home.
And I mean, that's, knock on wood, it doesn't occur, but it almost seems like naive not to expect it, that, that there's going to come the case of a wrestler and then suddenly backtracking of all the different shows they've worked over the last few weeks and who they've come into contact with. And that, to me, like, we've seen the effects of, now it's 2 players on the Utah Jazz that have tested positive for it, and the league suspending its games. Other leagues have followed suit as well. That, that's got to be top of mind as well if you're a performer, and just having that paranoia seep in as well.
Definitely. I mean, that's happened over here as well. The Premier League, the big football league in England, is still going on, but there has been players that have suffered as well, who've had to self isolate, and obviously, the same thing with wrestling. We joke about wrestlers not shaking hands backstage, but once they're out there in the ring, they're doing lots more than shaking hands, aren't they? Lots of fans about, lots of interaction with fans as well. It really does only take one case for this type of thing to really spread and wrestling to become a focus of the news as well.
What has the impact been of everything thus far on the independent scene over there, Benno? And if these companies are going to have to cancel all these shows financially, how will it impact all of them?
Yeah, I think a lot of promotions in the UK are living hand to mouth, and they're dependent on these live shows and dependent on flights they may have booked already and talent they may have booked already. Obviously, yeah, OTT have felt that already this weekend, and good for them. Fans have banded together and started, I believe it's a GoFundMe to help out OTT, because even a company as big as OTT, if you lose a big show with a couple of days' notice, you have to refund a lot of tickets. You might have already booked flights that you can't get money back for. I saw GCW say it yesterday. From an American point of view, with small companies, there's not going to be that level of insurance that a big company would have. So the general feeling I'm getting is, obviously, aside from OTT, because they're an island and they're a different case, the British companies, the English companies, the likes of Catch Wrestling, who came out today, announced their show is still going on. I'll be Preston City Wrestling. I've got a big Road to Glory tournament this weekend that is still going on. They're going to keep going until the government steps up and tells them not to. And that was the attitude they got in Germany as well. WXW told us directly to the media, if our Bundesliga, the big football games are going on with tens of thousands of people, then who's going to cancel this small wrestling show? Obviously, that situation changed in Germany, so it'd be interesting to see if it does change in the UK as well, because these local promotions do live basically show to show, and if a show is taken away and there are big refunds to be made, there might be smaller promotions that don't make it. There might be wrestlers who really struggle, who are dependent on that week to week paycheck from the individual companies, and will be scrambling for bookings. So yeah, it does unfortunately look quite bleak if the situation does continue as it has been worldwide.
And I mean, that really extends right to the top, because that is now within professional wrestling, the major focus on WrestleMania weekend. And it seems to be like this weird issue back and forth at the moment, where the city of Tampa doesn't want to be the one to make the call, and WWE doesn't want to make the call. And both of them are pointing in the opposite direction, saying, you decide what's happening. And it seems that it's just limbo at the moment. And it could be for at least another week that I just, as the hours progress, Benno, it just seems like, is this the wisest idea? Even, with the financial ramifications that come with pulling the plug, it does seem to be the responsible choice to make in this moment.
Yeah, it does. To delay it, or to do it later in the year, or to find another solution, just to announce something, I think would be a good idea, because it's all well and good, the city coming out and saying, oh, it's a few weeks away, yet we've still got time to make a decision. But when you've got traveling fans who are going to have hotels booked and flights booked and show tickets booked, never mind the smaller promotions who are hanging on, hoping there's going to still be a big weekender coming up, it's those kinds of people that are caught in the crossfire. And obviously, with the travel ban that Trump put in place for Europeans to fly out, that doesn't affect the UK and Ireland at the moment, but anybody in Central Europe is pretty much stuffed right now, for it looks like, at least for WrestleMania weekend. And yeah, the Brits and Irish are probably going to be in the same position as well. So yeah, I think this uncertainty and putting off the decision, it feels inevitable to me. It feels, based on all of the other sports leagues, it seems, in the US and most parts of the rest of the world, the obvious decision is going to have to be to cancel or delay WrestleMania, mostly delay it. So yeah, I just hope that they don't leave it too late and leave too many fans, wrestlers, and wrestling companies on the fringes and out of pocket here.
If you can put yourselves into the shoes of a the European consumer that has booked all of their travel and tickets for Tampa, if you were in that position now, are you looking at just you're out at this point, or are you holding on at the end when some of these are not guaranteed to be refundable? And I think people are going to be thinking that way about what they've invested, and kind of, turning in their chips at this point and realizing this is not happening at this point. I mean, what would be kind of your course of action now? Because it's certainly the one we're in at this point.
Yeah, I think it's a really hard decision to make. I was in a similar, but not maybe as extreme position with WXW last weekend, and a lot of other people were, and myself and other people chose to still travel and go to the show. Keep our bookings right up to the day of the show, in the worry that might cancel. This is that tenfold, and I think that the smart thing probably is to cut your losses and just see the writing on the wall, and see that even if it does go ahead, I think it's not going to be, everything that, there will be casualties. There'll probably be smaller shows that have to take the decision to cancel early. And I wonder, can you even get away with a big stadium show? I think the smart thing and the smart advice would be to maybe take the loss now, unfortunately, and do your best to cancel. But yeah, that's an easy thing for me to say. If I was in that position and I had non-refundable flights or non-refundable hotels, you probably will be, sitting looking at your phone, scrolling Twitter with your fingers crossed, hoping in this big weekend is still going on. But yeah, it certainly doesn't look particularly good right now.
And I've got to say, like, just seeing, really feeling for a lot of these promoters that have so much invested, the independent wrestlers that this weekend means so much to. It might not be the right time now, but at some point, there is a larger conversation here to be had about, that these wrestlers and these promoters, that they depend show to show to make a living. And they're in these cases, I think many of them would put their well-being to the side in making this decision. And that's not something you just snap your fingers and can have, an association in place, a union in place, certain protective measures for such an extreme example that we're seeing at the moment. But I mean, that is somewhat a cautionary moment out there to look upon, that here, these people are going to put their health at risk in order to, make a paycheck, which I can understand that line of thinking, that you don't work, you don't get paid. And that's the reality for those that are not contracted performers with major companies.
Yeah, reality is the word. It's a reality check. Over in the UK, we might make sometimes on our show BWE, we might occasionally make fun of people signing NXT UK contracts. But you sign an NXT UK contract, and at least you're guaranteed an income from a stable company. If you're an independent wrestler, and don't we all love our independent wrestlers who fly their own flag and do their own thing? This is the obvious negative of that. Whether it be an injury or whether it be a catastrophe like this, international emergency like this that you really can't plan for, it is a real reality check for the difference between the haves and the have-nots in wrestling. Because there are so many wrestlers who do depend on the bookings that they have, do depend on the merch that they're going to sell at the shows that they're having, that fan interaction, and they are living hand to mouth and living week to week. So yeah, it's a real reality check. It pushes the point of maybe on a lower level some kind of unionization in wrestling. I know David Starr has been pushing for that in the UK, where if you do join some of the unions over in the UK, you will be protected for bookings that you lose or paydays that you lose. But obviously that's just the UK. The internationally and in Florida particularly, I don't believe it's quite the case there. So yeah, there's maybe some things wrestlers can do. You can everyone can sit on our high horses, can't we, and say, save your money, be careful for moments like this. But when you're a wrestler on the grind, that's easy to say and hard to put in practice. So yeah, it's a real reality check for those kinds of wrestlers, and hopefully, the support we've seen from fans. I've seen lots of fans on Twitter's arrange, things like GoFundMe's and just generally push for fans to join VOD services or buy some more T-shirts. Obviously, if you've got the money, do that. If you don't. But hopefully those types of things are helping the wrestlers in this really unfortunate position.
Do you feel like there's a way for, wrestlers or in wrestling companies to continue to make a living without actually putting on physical shows, without actually putting on maybe even matches? Is something like that at all possible in your mind?
Yeah, I suppose you see the likes of Patreon. I know there are some wrestlers who run Patreons. I think trying to think of some. Colt Cabana has had a Patreon over the past, mainly to do with his podcast. But Ethan Page has a Patreon where he does extra content. He puts out videos on there and generally keeps better in touch with his fans, does merchandise discounts. I think those kind of wrestlers who are creative in that way, who maybe, make an extra bit of living from podcasting or video logs or just from general, direct to fan kind of consumption. I think those guys are probably going to be better off than the rest. But yeah, it's going to be tough with no shows to meet fans directly. These wrestlers are really going to have to be creative. So yeah, maybe those kind of social media avenues might be the way forward to bridge the gap between now and whenever this thing is maybe moved on a little bit.
Just touching a little bit on this past weekend, you were there present for the press conferences that I don't know how many people maybe outside of attending these events are familiar with, but I do have to say that, there was a major story coming out of Saturday's show with David Starr, and to their credit, like the WXW, their officials, they go out in front of you guys, and it seems like all questions are open. They might not be completely transparent about every subject that is brought up, but I do give them credit that they have that kind of setup for the media to at least ask questions. And, it seems like a very professional setup at WXW. And I've always heard that's been the case for these weekends.
Oh, absolutely. And it's completely foreign to, the likes of us covering British wrestling. I believe Progress have tried to do media events in the past, but not to this level. And I don't think there's any other comparison really to what WXW do. And yeah, they put themselves on stage and they're willing to, field these questions, whether it be, questions about David Starr and WWE, or it be questions, directly about their booking. You do have to applaud them for being there. Unfortunately, yeah, there are questions they can't answer, and that's become a real common theme these last 3 or 4 media panels, to be honest, ever since rumors of a potential relationship with WXW and WWE came about. And then as it became more and more obvious there was a relationship, they've been, I'd say, even less able to answer certain questions. But even then, yeah, when they do have to dance around certain details, they are there to face the media and they are there to answer questions as best they can. And yeah, considering the position I suppose they're in from a business point of view, that's about the most you can really ask of any promotion in 2020.
And what do you see as kind of David Starr's role right now within the European scene at large? If it's one that is disconnected from WXW, that he has largely been removed from Progress as well. I mean, this was certainly a big story coming out of the weekend, and in light of worldly events has kind of been overshadowed since. But he, I hope it's a story that at some point more people can revisit, because it was certainly something that I hope doesn't get forgotten.
No, absolutely not. And yeah, it was a huge story on the weekend. And yeah, I think hopefully at some point when normal business resumes, it will continue to be a big story. As I heard Way say earlier in the week, I think with David Starr, he's the type of person who can take this kind of story and wear it as a badge of honor. He's the independent David Starr who's too hot for WWE and isn't being used by their partner promotions. And I think he's most likely going to use it to push forward in OTT, in Rev Pro, in the places that he is allowed to work. But yeah, he has been the performer in European wrestling these last 2 years. So while, I think he's going to be fine and he's not going to struggle for work, it does really say something about the top end of this European wrestling scene, and that, yeah, WXW and Progress, which are probably the 2 biggest, certainly Progress in the UK, and in the wider Europe scene, it's probably WXW. And due to their ties to WWE, if reports from Dave Meltzer and the likes are to be believed, they've been quietly encouraged not to use David Starr, a wrestler as good as David Starr is, and a wrestler with the buzz and with the general fan support that David Starr has. So it's a really sad situation, really, that they on the one hand they get the whatever benefits come from this WWE relationship, whether it be a place on the WWE network, as has been rumored for a long time, lends their talent, as we saw over the weekend in WXW, with Alexander Wolf turning up and Leo Rush scheduled to turn up, but unfortunately cancelled at last minute. But they do have the negative, of not being able to use a wrestler as good as David Starr. And, from a fan point of view, they do, unfortunately for them, come across as the bad guy here. Everybody likes an underdog, and you can't really look at a story like this and not have sympathy for David Starr, even if you can recognize that, he will be able to use this for his advantage too.
And regardless of, what is said or not said by any of these companies or not. If you are a performer, I think it's certainly implied that you do not want to touch these landmines that are, talk of unionization. It's like, if you want to openly discuss those subjects, I mean, this is a cautionary tale. And I think that's a message that, whether you are told it or not, it's certainly implied.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. And whether that's, directly the reason, or, it's the other litany of things you could probably say David Starr has done over the last few months that will have annoyed WWE, it will, to push people away from making those type of statements. It might even push people away from, signing up to unions David Starr has recommended, like Equity, or just, being involved with his We the Independent movement. I think that does become a problem, really. I think it's going to be interesting to see if, we do see other David Starrs who are as vocal as him. Obviously, it'd be good for David Starr if he continues to be the only one flying this flag from a branding point of view, but for the real man behind David Starr, who really wants, and he does play that line, between character and the real man pushing for these things, but it will affect, what he wants to do going forward. At the end of the day, all of the things he wants, be it unionization of wrestlers, better payments of wrestlers appearing on the WWE network and on other services. These are all good things for wrestling and good things for wrestlers themselves as well. And yeah, if this quiet blackballing, if that's a word that can be used to describe this, is really true, then yeah, it's a cautionary tale for other wrestlers, and it's a really, really unfortunate thing, considering the great plans that it seems David Starr has for wrestling, and the things that he's trying to see put in place on an independent level that might help, big weekends like what's coming up with WrestleMania, and help wrestlers who might be struggling for work over these next couple of months.
There's also a great rundown of the entire weekend from 16 Carat that Benno has up on the site at postwrestling.com. I would encourage all of you to go check that out. A real thorough rundown of some of the highlights of the weekend, including Bandito and Speedball that everyone is raving about, and going through the major stories coming out of the weekend, including the David Starr story. And Benno, I was ready to wrap up this interview by locking in our date for May. But unfortunately, F9, just the latest addition to all of this, it has now been put off till April of 2021. So, I mean, the invite is still open. We will definitely be reviewing F9 with Benno, but it looks like we are going to have to wait 14 months for this movie to come out.
Wow, at least we're prepared, John. I mean, we've waited this long for Justice for Han. We can probably do another 14 months. If it means the safety of the world and the cinema goers, we can live with it. But yeah, it's a real killer having that trailer come out and that tease, and now we got to wait that long for this film. But it'll just make it worth the wait even more. And yeah, we can be really prepared. We can book that podcast in now. So yeah, in 14 months from now, we'll be here. We'll be chatting about Fast 9, and I'm sure it'll be worth whatever wait.
Well, Benno, thank you so much. Always fantastic to chat with you, and going through like all of these issues that people want to hear from. So you can always catch Benno alongside Jamesy and Martin on the British Wrestling Experience bi-weekly here at postwrestling.com, and with Joe and JP on the Grapple Spotlight podcast. You guys, there may be less wrestling going on, but I don't think that there is any shortage of topics for the three of you coming up.
Yeah, 2-hour coronavirus special coming this Monday, everybody. Look for that, grapple.podbean.com.
Thanks a lot, Benno.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks, Benno.
So there you go. And yeah, his rundown is really great with his coverage of 16 Carat from last weekend. And just that weekend feels like it was a month ago now at this point. Like
here's the thing. It's like, it's really hard to concentrate and talk about, specific wrestling shows, as I'm sure many people experienced last night trying to watch either Dynamite or NXT. I mean, with everything else going on,
your head's just not in it.
What is the appetite even for professional wrestling right now? We have time for one call before we get to our guest, Alex Patel, but let's go to the phone lines right now. Hansi, what's on your mind?
Oh, what's going on, guys? I didn't really have much to. I just wanted to tell everyone to be safe with this whole coronavirus thing. I was gonna ask you guys for your advice, because the WWE. I mean, I don't know if they're gonna cancel the event on Saturday, but I had tickets, and now I don't even know if I should go. Like now I'm like even my mom told me, she goes, listen, you're a grown man, you can make your decisions, but I would not suggest it. And now it's like, I don't know how to get a refund from StubHub or anything like that. If I don't go, I don't know if I get a refund. But
How
you
much
guys
are the
think I
tickets,
should
Hansi?
American, it was $100 for floor seat for a floor seat.
These seats
by
were
the,
not. I looked at the seating chart a few weeks ago. Like these were not like it's an expensive ticket here in Toronto.
Hansi, $100 is a lot of money. That would suck, but it's only $100. You know, like I mean,
I know.
Hopefully you can get something back, but you know, people who are struggling with these decisions. I mean, listen, ultimately it's just up to you. Maybe in your area it's not really that serious, and it's worth if you even want to consider it a risk. But if it seems like you're concerned, and you know, you just have to ask yourself if your concern is worth the $100 or $200 or however much that you're paying.
No, for sure. And listen, guys, before I go, I just want to say stay safe, man, and I hope this isn't for a conspiracy theorist like me. This is like this day has been like on the rise for a long time. I always predicted something like this was going to go down. So I just hope everyone stays safe, and I hope we don't have like a Walking Dead situation arising. So I hope everyone in post wrestling, or just around the world, stay safe. And happy early birthday, by the way. I know it's your birthday this weekend. And again, guys, good work as usual. I just wanted to call in quickly. I didn't really want to talk about wrestling because this has been on my mind the whole day. So wrestling has to take a back seat. But I'm glad that you guys came on to I like when you guys do these podcasts and where we're all getting through this together and all that. So I appreciate you guys for taking the time to go through all this with us and all that. I appreciate you guys.
Well, thank you, Hansi.
And you stay safe as well, Hansi. Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of people want to get on. We want to take all of your calls, but before that, we're going to go to our guest in a few short seconds here. Like Hansi mentions, I think a lot of people are very confused, perhaps concerned, and this is why I think it's especially important to not just have people speculating and maybe spreading information that might not completely be the most up-to-date and the most accurate. And this is also why I think it's good to have expert opinion. So we look forward to getting Dr. Alex Patel on very shortly. But John, anything else you would like to discuss? Anything else that's on your mind?
No, I think that this really is dominating everything, more so than any other stories that are going on in wrestling. We can add that Evolve has postponed their shows, and those were set to go this weekend. All right. Do we want to turn that down maybe?
I'm hearing it. So it's not going on air.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So anyway, the Evolve shows, they have postponed their shows that are coming up this weekend. Those have been postponed until May. And AEW, apparently the latest here, is that next week's show will not take place from Rochester, New York, as had been scheduled, and looks to be moved to July, that they will be in Rochester. So that was first reported by Mike Johnson, and joins the list here. And that, of course, earlier we had mentioned that Governor Andrew Cuomo has banned any gatherings of more than 500 people within the state until further notice. So those look to be the latest. I would expect an official announcement about SmackDown to be made pretty soon regarding Friday night's show. So we will keep tabs on that as well.
I believe we have our guest on the line, and hopefully he's there right now. Alex, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Thanks a lot.
Wonderful.
Alex Patel is here. He is one of our listeners. He is also a critical care physician here in Toronto at a local hospital. Alex, thank you very much for joining us. Can you just sort of give us a sense of what the last 24 hours has been like for you, and has it dramatically increased in terms of the awareness, the concern, as compared to the past week, for example?
Well, for us, it's been like this probably for the better part of the last week.
Okay.
We knew once things started to ramp up in Italy that we were inevitably going to see an increase in caseload here. Today, we get sort of updates twice a day and 2 calls a day about what's going on. This morning there were, in Ontario, 17 new cases, which is the highest that we've had. So that's, been the cause of alarm. Obviously, there's been background chatter about all the events being canceled and everything. But I would say there's been, a heightened sense of awareness for a while about this, and we've been doing preparation, and I wouldn't say the last 24 hours has really changed much, other than sort of I think made more people around us aware of what's going on.
What would you say would be an appropriate level of concern right now from the public, and do you feel like we are getting there? Do you feel like there's still a great deal of people that aren't taking this as seriously as they should be? Are we taking it too seriously?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think most people are taking it, somewhat seriously now for sure, and perhaps even erring a little bit on the side of extreme. A lot of this depends on where you live. So obviously, if you live in Europe, particularly Italy, it's a huge issue, and they're doing their best to isolate everyone. If you live in North America and you're not in one of the areas where we have increasing spread, especially within the community, which means spread from people to other people, and we don't know how they got it. And the main areas that's occurring in is Washington, the Bay Area, and there's a case in BC. In those areas, there's definitely a heightened sense of vigilance. Everywhere else, we're not in outbreak mode. In fact, if you look at the way we're classified in Toronto and in most of the cities in the U.S., we're classified into low outbreak mode, which means we're not recommending, people isolate themselves or bunker down. We're recommending at this point, good hand hygiene, as you guys have said many times on your show, making sure you try not to touch your hands to your face, avoiding, high-risk situations like large group settings, large congregations, places where you're touching a lot of people, and that's all called part of social distancing, trying to maintain, a boundary of about a meter from people you don't know, and of course, if you're sick or you've traveled, isolating yourself from people. So that's kind of where we're at. It shouldn't really at this point in these areas be interfering with your day-to-day life. You should still be able to go, to most places you usually go to. Just have to exercise some common sense around high-risk areas and if you're ill.
We've been talking a lot on the show about, WWE potentially canceling WrestleMania and maybe just even sporting events at large all around the world being canceled. What is your opinion about, first of all, WWE, WrestleMania in particular, but also other sporting events all around the world?
So I think WWE WrestleMania is quite a problem for two reasons. Number one is just the number of people it attracts. So you take your traditional sort of NBA game and you've got 20,000 fans. WWE is going to attract much more than that, and it's going to attract a lot of travelers. The problem with that is you're going to get people coming in there that are traveling, and we know that a lot of the time, they're not necessarily bringing the virus from where they are, but they're picking up at the airport, they're picking it up on the airplanes, and you're getting a lot of people coming into an area where they could certainly have the virus, and then we know that they can start to show symptoms within about 5 days on average. So if they pick it up, they attend a few, pre-wrestling events, they're there, they attend a couple of, they could certainly get symptomatic on that trip and it can be spread, in and around WrestleMania. They can also take that back home and maybe they're in a country where they don't have a lot of cases and now you're introducing it there as well. On top of that, you start to get this concept of community spread where things are being spread without us knowing. And when that happens, when we can't link specific cases to a traveler, that's really when we start to see an escalation in cases. And that's when we get really concerned from an epidemiology standpoint that we're going to see increasing cases and that we're going to start to really have to take aggressive measures. And an event like WrestleMania is a perfect breeding ground for encouraging something like that. So I think it should be, with a heightened sense of awareness that it is quite a high-risk situation. Now, that being said, Tampa is not necessarily at this point an endemic area. It's not the same as if it was in Washington, but that may change in a week. And we already know there are some cases there. And we know that majority of this is not just Tampa Bay people. It's people traveling in. So I would say it's more high risk than most NBA and NHL games and most of the other things you're seeing canceled.
Are there any common misconceptions that you're seeing on a routine basis? Anything that you're seeing as kind of like a pattern of, whether it be just misinformation or just, confusion that is naturally going to come out of a situation like this?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can address a few of those. The first one is around, what is social distancing and what does it mean? And do I not hang out with my friends? And that's not what it means. Social distancing means avoiding things like high-risk situations in large group settings, not, excessive contact with people. If you're sick, then staying home. If you travel, staying away from people. And generally speaking, if you're hanging out with people that you do know and everyone is well, that's not violating social distancing. I think the other thing is generally speaking, around how dangerous the virus is. So we know that 80% of people who get the virus will not be hospitalized. In fact, in Ontario, we've had about 59 cases and no one has been hospitalized really yet for it. We know most people will go home and they will be okay. We know 15% will end up in hospital and 5% will actually come to the ICU, and those are the ones that, obviously I'm most focused on. But we know that most of those are going to be those with, chronic health illnesses and those that are elderly. So I think it's important to exercise more caution around that. And the other thing is people are just a lot of hysteria about how this is spread. It's spread through what we call droplet, which means that droplets from someone's mouth have to end up either onto you because they directly cough on you, or they have to end up on a surface that you touch and then sort of touch your mouth. And we know, based on some data out of France, that's about 3 hours that the virus can be live on things. It's not because you get a package from China and you open it up. It's not because, somebody touched something 2 days ago and you're worried about it. So, if you're in a situation where you are touching things that people may be around, it's good to make sure that you either wipe it down or exercise good hand hygiene and wash it. And, maintaining some distance around people is okay. But just because somebody in the same room as you even has this, as long as, if they were, far away from you, they're very unlikely to transmit it to you. It's not an airborne type disease.
Are there any specifics you can impart on people that naturally there's going to be some level of paranoia? If I start to get a cough or a runny nose, that I'm immediately going to assume the worst, and we don't want to overcrowd hospitals such as the one you're working at. Is there anything you can inform people of things to be looking for, or is it, it's not necessarily you can self-diagnose yourself, obviously?
So the main thing is if you're in an area where it's not endemic yet, then usually you need a link. So a link to either have traveled yourself or a close contact who's traveled. So obviously if you have that will increase the risk that this is COVID. In terms of symptoms, the predominant symptom that we can isolate is fever. And we know that typically it's about 5 days after you've been exposed, and fever occurs in most people. If you have a fever, the other symptoms in descending order are cough and shortness of breath. Now, obviously, those have a lot of mimicry with diseases such as influenza, the common flu, and other respiratory illnesses. Some clues that it may be one of the others: a runny nose, typically associated more with the common flu, not so much with COVID. Headache is more with influenza, again, not so much with COVID. To give you a sense, though, we've swabbed in Ontario something like 3,000 people, and 59 of them. So 3,000 people we thought maybe had it, and 59 have had it.
Okay.
So that means, over, 2,800 or 2,900 have had something else. And generally speaking, it's influenza or RSV, which is like the common cold. So those, on the whole, are much, much more common. If you have a bit of a sniffly nose and you don't have a fever and you have a bit of a cough and a little bit of congestion and you haven't had any link with somebody who's traveled and you're not in like Washington, D.C. or an area where it's really spreading, you probably don't have COVID almost certainly. And, you don't need to necessarily run to your local ER. We are actually setting up COVID centers. We just had a meeting about that around the city. That should be coming out in the news soon. One of them is being set up near where I work, where you can go in and get tested for COVID, and it's simply people who may have that. So that's a good spot to go if for some reason you think there is a travel link or your symptoms fit more with that. Otherwise, for the vast majority of people who have a little bit of an illness, we still advise that you stay home, but you probably don't have COVID.
What can you educate us maybe what the latest is on the I guess how contagious this is for first of all pets, but also for children, because I've heard conflicting things about both of those things.
Right. So the virus is what we call a beta coronavirus. So the best it mimics is SARS, if you guys remember SARS from 2003. What we do know about it is that it's more contagious than SARS. So SARS was spread not as aggressively, but SARS was much more fatal. The fatality rate in SARS was about 20%. This one is much less. It's closer to 2 to 5%, but it does spread more aggressively. Now, in terms of children, what we do know is that it rarely affects children. It can, and when it does, it's almost certainly never going to be lethal. No one under the age of 10 has died from this, as best we know. So in general, it's not a disease of young people. Kids can get it. There was a case in Ontario, but it's very rare that they get it. Even if they do, they usually recover. Predominantly, the ones that get sick are the older and the elderly, which is a little bit different than SARS, where we saw even young people getting very sick with this. So that's kind of the pattern of how it affects young people versus older people.
In your opinion, seeing how reportedly numbers in China are de-escalating, maybe even flatlining at the moment, has at least a portion of the world figured out a solution to combat this that others can replicate?
Yeah, I mean, it's very encouraging. So the number one thing you're going to hear about if you read a lot online or you hear things is something called flattening the curve. And what flattening the curve means is we know that if the whole population gets exposed at once, that the caseload will be astronomically high the virus won't last very long because everybody gets it right away, but you're going to overwhelm hospitals and things like that. And that's kind of what's happening in Italy. That's why you see these sort of parabolic or quite increases that are occurring daily. In China, in Korea, in Japan, they've done a good job of trying to flatten that. So the way they did that was using social isolation or social distancing from people, as well as isolating travelers, making sure people stay home when they're sick. And by doing that, what they've done is reduce the caseload to the point that they're spreading it out a bit longer, but it's less total cases overall, and it's less at one time. So they're not overloading the medical system. And in fact, we are seeing in China, there were only, I think, 12 new cases today. We're seeing Korea come down nicely. We're seeing Japan level off. So we know that based on that, if you do good sort of epidemiology type things to prevent spread, you can level it out and it will come down. In terms of specific treatment for this, it is not a bacteria, so antibiotics are not effective. There are antivirals that are given. Typically, there are two that we use, and they are HIV antivirals, so medications that we would have used for HIV that we can use for this. Usually, we reserve those for sicker patients that are admitted to hospital. For the vast majority, they don't need any treatment. They'll recover on their own.
In terms of Ontario, how would you kind of assess how prepared the hospitals have been for this high volume as well? And is there any link to the SARS outbreak, having gone through this in 2003, that's made this province at least more equipped, or is there no real connection there?
No, there's definitely a connection. We're very equipped. We've been on the ball in terms of getting this going for the last while, even before we had many cases here. So we've, to give you an idea, already ramped up in our hospital and around hospitals, ICU coverage. You know, we've all created backup schedules. We all haven't been traveling, the physicians, that is. And we've done a great job of making sure that we have these centers up and running to screen people right away. So there is a heightened sense here of preparedness. And we know from SARS that a lot of the spread in SARS, the secondary spread, was at a hospital in the GTA, where it got spread to healthcare workers and out. So, you know, we've been doing a great job here making sure we have enough masks for people, that we have the proper training. We're going through mock exercises. So we don't anticipate, in fact, we have not seen a lot of what we call nosocomial or healthcare-related spread with this. So in Ontario, at least, we are very prepared, and we don't think this is going to overwhelm the medical system if people do a good job of staying home when they're sick and not getting the caseload up right away. If it does what's done in a lot of the other countries where it sort of spreads out over time, we can certainly accommodate most people, and we think we'll be okay. So SARS has definitely helped in that, but I think in general, just everyone here is taking it very seriously and is very prepared.
Do you believe that same precautions are being taken place in the rest of North America? And you know, we heard the president speak on national TV about some of the restrictions that they're implementing as far as travel. Are you happy with how, let's say, the American or even the Canadian governments have dealt with this thus far?
I would have liked to have seen a better response. I heard Doug Ford today talking about how he felt people could just, from March break, come back, and I think that that's sort of the wrong idea to take. I think we know if you travel, it's high risk, and I think even if you travel and you're not sick right away, we know the disease may not come out for 5 days, so I think everyone should be isolated when they come back if they've traveled right now. We know that travel is a high risk, and I think, you know, we should be doing that. So I would have liked to have seen a stronger statement on that, and I know, you know, most of my colleagues and us have drafted a letter to sort of send to the government that we're in the process of doing. I think in Italy, they didn't do a great job of taking it seriously initially, and we sort of saw the effects of that, and it's hard to catch up when you don't do that. In parts of the U.S., they have a bit of a problem as well because of the way that their system works. I don't know whether everyone there can seek out care for free like you can here. So there is that impetus sometimes not to do that. So I think that does limit their ability to get everybody who is screened right away and isolated as much as we can here. I think overall, though, I think most people are coming around. I think, you know, in areas where it's starting to spread more, like Washington and California, they've shut down most things. They've limited gatherings. They're really trying to keep the caseload low. The United States is following more of an Italy pattern in their initial curve, more so than Canada is. So they are seeing an escalation in cases. And, you know, we don't know the exact reason. It could be because access to healthcare. It could be because, you know, they just have more people, and because of that, you're going to have more travelers. But, you know, I think it's a step in the right direction. I think Trump took it much more seriously now, obviously, than he was before. Just banning travelers, though, isn't, from one part of the world, is not going to solve the problem. We have to be smart about how we treat anyone who travels and anyone who's sick right now.
Anything we haven't covered, Alex, that you maybe want to convey to people out there that maybe, you know, obviously a significant amount of concern that's out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think I want to convey that, you know, not to think the world is ending right now. by and large, you can do most of what you do. You just have to be smart about it. So if you're sick, stay home. If you've traveled, stay home until you've had an appropriate amount of time. If you have elderly parents or you have people on immunosuppressives that are high risk, don't go near them if you're sick. If you happen to have large congregations like a WrestleMania, for instance, it may not be popular to say, but I think you should avoid those right now because we know those are high-risk areas to spread. Don't go touching a lot of people without making sure you wash your hands and things like that. And I think if you follow those general practices, at least until this, maybe becomes a community-borne disease where everyone has it, you can still go about most of your life, and you should. I don't think we're going to win anything by everyone, bunkering down, maybe as people are doing. So I think that's the message: is to take it seriously, to distance yourselves from people as you can. Make sure that you're isolating yourself if you're sick or traveled, but doing the things that you can otherwise do to live your life.
Alex, thank you so much for all of the information, as well as on the forum as well. I know I speak for everyone. They are very grateful for all the information you've been able to impart.
No problem. I'm happy to help anytime I can.
All right.
Thank you, Doctor.
Alex Patel, everybody, a critical care physician here in the city of Toronto. And one update I can add, because we brought this up on Rewind to Dynamite, is that the beer spot in the main event, it was not a random beer. It was untouched from a plant.
Oh, very good.
I can relay.
Very good to know. And I suppose maybe potentially seeking the attention of whoever produced that beer.
A very responsible decision to make. Also, again, this is kind of locally for us in the province of Ontario. Schools have been ordered to remain closed from March 14th through April the 5th. So
okay.
That's another measure being taken in our home province. But
our Prime Minister is self-quarantining.
He is, yes.
After his wife was found to have certain symptoms after travel to, I believe, England. So.
Yes. So I know that we're still waiting just official word on some of the events that are coming up this weekend with SmackDown, that it is seeming...
well, it's tomorrow, so we'll have to find out pretty shortly.
It's looking unlikely it will be in Detroit, I will say. And then we have, the Bellator, UFC shows, AEW next week. It looks like Rochester, that will not be happening there in Rochester. So, it's all these companies. It's pretty much like, how far out are you moving stuff? Are you making adjustments? It's very hard. It's not like you can just say that, hey, this is going to be life for 6 weeks. It could be 6 months. You don't know how widespread this is going to be for this period of time. There's a lot of uncertainty, and with that, you run into the chance for conflicting messages, and you just have to be really cautious about your information as well.
A lot of people want to get on the phone lines. We'll try to take as many calls as
Let's
you
do
can.
calls for the rest of the show.
Let's try to keep everything as short as possible, if you guys don't mind. We go back to the phone lines right now. Caller, thank you for waiting. What's up?
Hey, guys. Paul from New Jersey.
Hi,
Hey,
Paul.
Hey, so, I just, man, that was great with Alex. And, man, I really appreciate this community, because as somebody who works in government, some of the things I've heard over the past days and weeks, and especially from this current administration, has been bananas. But I guess my thing is, and I don't know if this has come up, hypothetically, if WWE did go on with WrestleMania, wouldn't it be a half-empty stadium?
An empty stadium.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, if they permitted people to go.
Oh,
Yeah.
It's certainly going to affect, I think, people that will not be up for traveling there. Certainly. It's WrestleMania was not sold out to begin with, but certainly this would, I think, eliminate a lot of spectators. I have such a hard time imagining that if WrestleMania were to happen, I couldn't imagine it being open to the entire public.
Yeah, for sure. And just to transfer it real quick onto Rob Gronkowski. I know you guys aren't big football fans, but I think that's such a great signing for them. My question is he going to report to the PC, or are they going to try? It seemed like they were going to try to get him on TV right away.
Yeah, it seemed like he was going to be introduced on next week's SmackDown show. I certainly can't imagine that Gronkowski would be coming in here to do this regularly. We talked about the concussion issues. From his own description, he believes he's had 20 or so concussions. That is alarming immediately. So he's 30 years old, fantastic athlete, has great personality as well.
But the history of concussions, and you're training to become a wrestler. Think about all the bad things, all the wrong things that you have to learn to not do in order to actually do them. So
I think you're looking at like a celebrity wrestler that maybe is going to do 1 or 2 matches a year would be the absolute kind of. I couldn't see him doing any kind of regular.
They can build up to a big WrestleMania thing, or at this point, who knows what show it would be involved. But just to have that name attached to the brand, maybe do some live TV appearances, maybe that's all in all the type of value that they're looking for from this deal.
Especially when you're in Boston this summer, potentially for SummerSlam.
Yeah. Back to the phone lines. Caller, you're on the air. What's up? Hello, caller. I believe this is John. Can you hear me?
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Hi, guys. Happy belated birthday, John.
Thank you very much. And a happy birthday to Wai.
Oh, yeah. Happy future birthday. I don't know when it is. Sorry.
It's on Saturday. But let's move on.
I just want to speak as I have family in Italy who is going through this. They have not left their house.
Yeah.
And what we're not realizing is like 3 weeks ago, Italy was fine. And now it's the worst place hit. And I've heard that.
It was fine, but it really wasn't fine because that's when everything was probably being spread. But yes, I understand. Sorry.
So we don't know what the landscape of America will be come WrestleMania weekend. Like I've heard 170 to 150 million Americans are going to get hit with this. That's what I believe some doctor said on I can't remember which doctor it was, congressional doctor or something said that. I think WWE's making a mistake. They just can't postpone it or something. All these shows, I don't even know why they're doing SmackDown. They need to just cancel everything. It's just money at the end of the day. You're risking people's health for a show. And I don't agree with empty stadiums. I mean, I commentate wrestling, and I feed off the crowd just as much as the wrestlers feed off the crowd. If there's no crowd, matches are stupid. Like, that makes no sense to me. I just think that this is, from what I heard, Vince wants the city to cancel it so he get money back from insurance or something. That's the reason why both parties aren't really canceling it, because if Vince McMahon cancels it, he doesn't lose money. But if the government or if Tampa cancels it, he gets money back. But I also think this is kind of Vince McMahon's ego playing a part in this. Like, let's be honest, this guy was the first guy to do a show after 9/11. He's the guy that puts all those stats up on Raw and SmackDown about social media followers and ratings. He wants to be the guy to be like, listen, everyone else canceled, but we're not canceling. How much money you want to bet he comes on someone wrestler on SmackDown talks about how everyone else is shutting down, but we're live. Or, you know what I mean? I just think it's a mistake. He needs to cancel it. Fans will forgive you. Postpone it, whatever. I mean, if it was up to me, he should move it up and do it next week. Like, I don't know the logistics of it, but wouldn't it be better if you really want to put
you wouldn't
on
be able to move it at this point. I mean, there's just too much, all invested on one weekend, from travelers to so many other factors.
People are already alerted enough that I certainly don't see concerns getting lesser.
Listen, I don't want to just simplify it that it's just a decision you just make automatically. It's very easy when you're not making a decision that affects all of these different people and the revenue involved. But I think as you see the actions of other leagues, other events, that as the not even days progress, but the hours progress, that it just seems that, here is a spotlight on a company that has not been able to make a decision that others with similar losses that they are facing, from the NCAA to the NHL and the NBA, are making. I don't think you're standing out in a good way, even if there may be well-intentioned ideas to try and move forward and keep this thing going. There does come a point where you just have to acknowledge that this is not in the public's interest to go forward with this, and then come up with our contingency, whether it is a summer WrestleMania, whether it is whatever countless other ideas there are. When it comes to television, I mean, the idea of doing empty arena shows, I mean, it becomes very difficult. What is the understanding level of a USA Network and Fox that they want those hours of content? It's not as though they live and die based on filling arenas. It's great for atmosphere, but are more people going to be watching television at the moment that they will tune in for Raw and SmackDown in front of empty arenas? That's not the biggest concern, though. It's, just when you're looking at it, that I can understand why you go forward with empty arena shows. But, the second that there is an outbreak of this among one person in that WWE locker room, like that's got to be almost like game over for 2 weeks.
We just saw it with the NBA and their plans to do empty arena matches.
And it's like I'm putting my talent in an airplane to go to all these cities at this moment, and one positive case comes out. That's it. Then we are not doing anything. So it's very risky.
When we're talking about any sort of sports, I mean, we're probably going to be talking a lot more about constant testing, and this extends obviously to especially, something like pro wrestling where you're getting to a great physical contact, but also the UFC. Can you imagine the level of testing now that needs to be in place for anybody to be able to take part in a cage match?
Who are in gyms every day?
Yeah.
I do want to read this because I do think it's important, because this guy has been kind of the poster boy of ignorance towards this. And this was from Rudy Gobert of the Utah Jazz, who I'm sure has been inundated with people's comments over the past 24 hours. He wrote this today on Instagram. I want to thank everyone for the outpouring of concern and support over the last 24 hours. I've gone through many emotions since learning of my diagnosis, mostly fear, anxiety, and embarrassment. The first and most important thing is I would like to publicly apologize to the people that I may have endangered. At the time, I had no idea I was infected. I was careless and make no excuse. I hope my story serves as a warning and causes everyone to take this seriously. I will do whatever I can to support, using my experience as a way to educate others and prevent the spread of this virus. I am under great care and will fully recover. Thank you for your support. And I just think that's important, because this was someone that did not take this seriously, that was openly joking about this. And, unfortunately, he has now tested positive for this. And I think it's very important to see that attitude change in such a significant degree, and the realities of what is out there.
We put so much value on celebrity that, if there's perhaps any sort of silver lining to be had, it's that when this stuff happens to people that we see every day, whether it be Tom Hanks or an NBA player, hopefully it has the effect of making everybody take it a lot more seriously. So some lessons to be learned right there for sure. Let's go back to the phone lines for as long as we can. Caller, what's on your mind?
Hey guys, it's Corey from Long Island. Can you hear me all right? I'm on speaker.
Yep, I hear you perfectly.
Perfect. So I have two tabs open right now on my computer. The first is a tweet from Governor Phil Murphy of New Jersey recommending the cancellation of all public gatherings of 250 plus people. In the second tab, I have my ticket to AEW's show in Newark. And I mean, I was sitting down with my friend watching Dynamite last night, and every time they mentioned this blood and guts match, we just looked at each other and just kind of shook our head. And it's like, we're both going to this, but we both know we're probably not going to this, whether it's going to be an official cancellation, which New York, which is where I live, they've been clamping down on everything. Every single show that I had a ticket for this weekend canceled. Public events, and same thing, 250 plus people. There's a hard lockdown on that with Governor Phil Murphy of New Jersey. He's saying it's a recommendation. That's not necessarily, the end all be all like command, but I can't see myself going to this Newark show, as much as that main event is huge, and as much as they're pushing this as like a pay-per-view on television. I just don't know if I can if as a social responsibility go, considering like how many people are going to be packed in there.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that that sentiment would be shared by a lot of people, and I think at the very least that show would be in doubt 2 weeks from now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's impossible to tell the future. As I would have said 24 hours ago, it's hard to imagine an arena of 10,000 people in 2 weeks for AEW, which Dave Meltzer had reported that Tony Khan kind of gave a speech to the locker room on Wednesday night, pretty much. And this is Dave Meltzer's reporting that anyone that is not comfortable traveling, that wants to take some shows off, that will not be held against you. It is not going to affect your standing or anything. And that to me is the kind of message that I would be very that would be very welcomed, I think, by people that are, in this industry and many industries. You have that that concern of, man, if I put my health in front of my job. Am I going to be jeopardizing anything to get that kind of reassurance? I think would be just that for a lot of people.
However, it does feel like it's step one in what maybe bigger decisions that this company has to take.
And again, I mean, this is also like they're doing a live show as a lot of this stuff is breaking on Wednesday night. And today it may be, we're not even giving people the option.
Yep. Back to the phone lines right now. Caller, what's on your mind?
Hello?
Hi there.
Hey, I missed the beginning of the show, so I don't know if you covered it, but
we'll cover it again.
Have you guys listened to Anthony Kingdom James's Handsome Genius Club podcast this morning?
No,
can't say I heard it. What did he say?
Oh, it broke my heart. He sounded like somebody kicked his puppy when he announced that he's canceling his union show that was going to happen on the 27th.
I mean, yeah. A lot of promoters are probably faced with the same thing right now. Again, though, I ask, think about the alternative. Like, think about the worst case scenario. Not to say that I wouldn't fault anybody for exercising caution. I have sympathy for people that are losing money on any sort of endeavor that they're taking part in. But listen, in 10 years' time, it'll be a blip, right?
I know. Well, Kingdom's talked highly of both of you. I know John spoken highly of Kingdom. So Benno was talking about the Patreons and such and supporting the wrestlers. If you would indulge me, can I throw out a plug for Kingdom James?
Absolutely, sure.
My name is Kingdom on Patreon and that's all the social media, but patreon.com/my name is Kingdom. I'm a patron there too. He puts up some fun stuff. Honestly, I don't know how anybody feels about just being flat out pitied, but man, my heart broke for the guy. You can get in at $2, and he does a podcast 5 days a week.
Yeah, cool.
Which I'll close with. He's talked about doing swap casts. I would love to get Kingdom back in the studio with you guys. Actually, John is how I discovered, you guys are how I discovered Kingdom had a Patreon in the first place.
We're very happy to have Kingdom on anytime. He's a friend of the show, and he puts on a lot of fun events in the local area. So whenever he gets back on his feet, that offer is definitely there.
Yeah, and listen, there's many promoters in promoting in the best of times is extremely
it's a risky endeavor either way.
Yeah. And the idea that you invest in putting on a show, that's what it is. It's an investment that you are going to get travel arrangements, accommodations for some, depending on the level of your show that you're putting on, and the hope is that you're going to make all that back and then some at your show. But when the show portion is taken out and there's costs that are non-refundable, it's the promoter that ultimately takes that loss. So I definitely have a lot of sympathy for all of the companies that are there WrestleMania weekend and in other parts of the country. This is not just centered on WrestleMania weekend in Tampa. There are promoters all over that are going to be affected by this and could be for the foreseeable future as well. So
I was going to say, not that it's on the top of anybody's minds, but since it is Wednesday, the numbers did come out. Did you want to
Sure, what do you have there?
Yep. So right now I have this past week's AEW Dynamite did 766,000 total viewers with a 0.26 in the Prime demo. NXT did 697,000 with a 0.21. And so AEW was 25th for the night, and then NXT was 42nd, and of course, all these
they're numbers you can really throw out because I think last night everyone's attention was on the presidential address and all of the cable news coverage. Just looking at the cable news numbers, that's what everyone was paying attention to, and certainly wrestling was not the priority for even the most ardent of fans, I would say. So I think that's going to wrap up the show. This one has breezed by, but all of a
Thank
sudden,
you.
90 minutes is over.
Thank you so much to all of our guests, especially Benno and especially Dr. Alex Patel for imparting so much knowledge and insight from their corners of the world. Again, I highly encourage everybody to go to the forums, check out Alex's thread, Wrestling and Coronavirus at forum.postwrestling.com. That continues to receive a lot of great activity and discussion from very educated and well-informed people, and also people that are asking great questions. So I encourage that type of participation. Thank you to everybody who was in the chat room today, and thank you to all the callers.
Yeah, and you can keep it. Postwrestling.com will have all the latest updates about show updates and whatever news comes out, courtesy of myself and Andrew Thompson, who has been on top of things throughout the day as well. So keep it tuned there. Thank you to everybody for joining us. We'll be back later on this weekend, and that is it. Thank you for tuning in to the Café Hangout.